it is time to talk about the Houston Rockets, who, as of recording, 29-17 record. They're fourth in the Western Conference. A 119.3 offensive rating, that's fifth in the league per cleaning the glass. A 112.1 defensive rating, that is third in the league per cleaning the glass. And a plus 7.2 net rating, that is also third in the league. The Houston Rockets, very clearly a very good basketball team. The Houston Rockets also have some limitations that are worth exploring when you talk about their level of contention that they can have in this conference. How deep can they go in the Western Conference, at least as presently constructed, which Fred VanVleet's still out. We'll see if he's back later this season. Steven Adams officially out for the season, so they're going to have to sort through that if they want to make another move. If this just simply means more Clint Capella, we'll see what happens on that front, but did want to mention that on the injury front. Steve, I think it is fair to start with the offense with this conversation.
Yeah.
Because I think it is very well established, especially since Ime Udoka took over as the head coach. This Houston Rockets defense has been good since he's been there. It is the strength of their defense. We're going to talk about some of the particulars of what makes their defense strong, of course, so we're not going to ignore that. But the offense seems to be a real conversation point right now. And it has been a conversation point on this very podcast, as we've sprinkled in Houston thoughts throughout the year. It's like, hey, they've been in the top 5 all year long. We've highlighted how good Kevin Durant is, how good Alperen Sengun is. For me, it's also been like, hey, they don't really take threes. This is kind of weird. This is a whole lot of offensive rebounding. And you were kind of like, well, hey, you probably just want to make shots anyway. Like, what does this really mean when we get to the playoff context? So you have some stuff. So I guess just kind of broadly speaking, Steve, like, where do you want to start with this Houston offense? Is this some of the high points, some of the question marks? What do you think is most appropriate here?
Well, I mean, I think you lay it out at first and understand what this team is trying to accomplish offensively and how they can kind of be good in a way that doesn't necessarily make sense statistically. This is a team that can execute in the half court. They can be methodical. They can punish you and with their defense when they're getting stops. And even if they feel slow offensively, they're able to kind of put themselves in a position to just kind of extend leads and control tempo that way, which is a positive. The issue, I think, for me is how much tempo do you want to have? How many times do you turn on a Rockets game and look at their offense and the first action comes with 14 seconds on the shot clock? Sometimes that can help you, and that should help them in a playoff series in theory because we know what we want to get to. But how often do you want to do that in the regular season? And how many times can you really generate good shots? I think when it comes to Houston, they have decent principles when it comes to moving the ball and attacking when they have movement. The issue is a lot of that comes off stops. And you get to a position where it's like, okay, how many times are we getting some like 2 on the ball? How many times are we getting a team to rotate? How many times are we really putting ourselves in pressure? So we get a stop. We're going to attack. We're going to push on the other end. And we put ourselves in a position where now you're scrambling to try and find something. We get you in rotation. We move the ball. We swing it. That doesn't look like Houston Rockets basketball in the half court, but they have it in them. But can they find a way to generate that in the half court is the biggest thing. Can they find a way to put pressure on teams to where there's a cut, they get a pop, you rotate, try and fly around, we get another drive. Can we win a drive, get a closeout? Can we do those things consistently? I think is where you start with it. So you can have the blend and the contrast of Houston being able to be a force, being able to attack early, and then you layer in what Kevin Durant brings to the table, who's been fantastic all year as far as punishing teams, and you bring in Alperen Sengun, what he brings to the table.
I think that's fair. And to your point, Steve, mentioned 5th in offensive rating. They're 9th in transition offense. They are 19th in half-court offense, slightly below league average on that front. So to your point, they are at their best when they are able to get stops. And again, this defense has been elite this year. And they're able to kind of flow early. You get the early attacks, you get more of the catch-and-shoot opportunities, and this is a Houston Rockets team, as alluded to earlier, they're not a team that takes a lot of threes to begin with. So when they do get their shots from the perimeter, they're able to create them early in the clock. Those are generally higher quality looks. And to their credit, they have made threes at a high clip this year. It's just more so we're not taking a ton of them. To your half-court point, was getting the numbers very quickly. 21st in terms of how quickly they get the ball across half-court on average. In terms of how quickly they get to their first action, bottom 5 in the league. In terms of how long their possessions last on average, dead last. It's not an impossible context to live in, but the bar is very high to be efficient within that context. If you are going to operate that slowly or that methodically, you have to knock down shots at a high clip. And ideally, you're also getting a good shot diet on top of that, which is where, again, some of my concerns kind of come in on that front. But they do have it in them. Like, even with some of the stuff that they run in the half court, like dummy pick and roll that flows into like Jabari coming off of a stagger or KD coming off of a stagger, and then being able to play out of that, especially when KD's involved with how often he's getting two on the ball with some of his touches in the middle of the floor. Like, that's where you can get to some good stuff. I've enjoyed the empowering of Amen Thompson. We're going to talk a lot more about him. As of late, they're just sprinkling in more of these handoffs and more of these pick and rolls for Jabari Smith Jr. to showcase, like, I can get to pull-ups whenever I want to. I have a little bit of passing ability there, nothing super advanced, but I can get to basic reads to keep things going. And in general, we've talked about this with a lot of teams, Steve. If we have other guys that can initiate, we can now get our best players off the ball and get them in position to where they are taking advantages if the guy that's initiating, your Amen Thompsons, your Jabari Smith Jr.'s, Reed Sheppard when he comes in. I have thoughts on Reed a little bit later as well. But if any of those guys can puncture the paint or something like that, or get two on the ball in any context, now it's KD against a closeout. Or if he drives and now it's a dump off to Alperen Sengun, who's just kind of roaming around. Like, they have ways to get to good stuff. They just don't get to it consistently enough for me.
Well, here's the thing. And as we roll through Jabari Smith Jr. clips, you think about how he looked when teams go over, or we can get the defense to go over. When he can get an over in pick and roll and his defender is chasing him, he's able to attack space, as you highlighted so well, it changes things when he has the patience. Teams want to go under, but when he gets that over, now you get the roll aspect of it. Now you get him getting downhill. You get more of that aspect. That's the key for Houston. I think when you talk about, and we're going to wait on Amen, but Jabari, Reed, Amen, they have to figure out the reads and the patience to understand, okay, how do I set this up so I can get this over so our offense can now have that pick and roll aspect. We can force help. I can either get downhill, get to my shot, or I can make a skip pass and play. Versus just, okay, it's an under. Now we're looking. Now I got to get to Alpi or KD, and now we're off the ball. I think that's where it gets tricky for those guys in different moments. And I think when you look at it in totality, right? How many times do you watch those guys play Nekias and it's like, ooh, they have it going, self-created basket, one-on-one play. How much of it is generated by their reads, and how much of it is just we have it going tonight? I think that's where it gets tough, because Houston, in theory, should be a team where it's like, ooh, what are they going to do against switches, right? They're still just getting outright unders, like just don't care, under, slide, whatever. So can we get to the rescreens? Can we get downhill? Can we get a second attack and put ourselves back in a position to have an advantage? I think that's the biggest thing that those three are going to have to do during the stretch of the season to prepare for the playoffs.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I'd say quickly on the Jabari front, he's run 79 pick and rolls this year. All of last season, he did miss a bunch of time, but including the playoffs, he ran 56. The efficiency numbers have skyrocketed from this year compared to last year. So, like, again, there's a little bit there, 0.94 points per possession if you want the actual number, just hovering around league average. That's fine for him. I guess for me, like, I'll kind of toss this question to you as someone that was around like the Grizzlies. Like, how do you kind of balance, we want to lead with our defense, we want these games to be slower without being too slow? Like, what is the line, or how do you kind of approach finding that line for, we want to control the possession game, which flows into the offensive rebounding and overall physicality that Houston plays with, but also, if we get below this, we are easier to guard. We are now in transition defense where Houston hasn't been very good, quiet as kept. Like, how do you find that balance?
Being a defense first team is tough, because in theory, you don't actually want to play offense the way you're playing. You just understand this gives us our best shot. So if we're able to get stops consistently, we know we have a little bit of wiggle room. Offensively, you like a little bit of tempo, but at the same time, you don't want to go too quick, because to your point, you say, okay, we're playing too slow, we're in transition. If we start playing too fast, now we're in transition, we're not controlling tempo anymore. I think the biggest thing when you're a defense first team is you have to have your pillars. You have to have your, okay, this is my go-to sets. We know what we're running. We know how we're going to be defended. We play out of that. I think that's why the Kevin Durant, Alperen Sengun two-man game and the evolution of that is so important for Houston, because they can lean on that in tough times to where, okay, I know maybe it's 18 on the clock. I can find Kevin Durant. I can get a pick and roll. We can put someone in action. And I'm either going to get a pull-up or I'm going to get Sengun on the short roll. I'm going to make the defense think about what we're doing. And that's where if you're a defense first team, you have to have that kind of flow. We can use Kevin Durant and get him off a stagger, and now we can run a pick and roll. And so even if those possessions are where we're deep in the clock, 10 on the clock, we feel better about it because our two best players are involved. Now, the key is your two best players have to produce. And that's where it can get interesting sometimes because you're gonna be in a position where those guys, it doesn't necessarily matter what the coverage is, but both of them have to be in that kind of space. And so KD, to his credit, and why I've said he's been so important to this Houston team, it doesn't matter what you do defensively against him. He's going to figure out how to be Kevin Durant. That's why he's been so good. The question now becomes, is Alperen Sengun going to hit those same levels? Not that he's not played well, but when you watch Sengun and he's looking to attack, he's looking to go one-on-one, how many times do you see the defense double? And you will have the stat, I'm sure, but I feel like it's gone down as the season has progressed. The drives that we liked at the early and start of the season were fantastic, but if teams are going to stay home and this now becomes, did you score or not? That puts us in a different position than when we were there early. And so how do we kind of navigate and handle that? Especially as teams are going to put wings on Alperen Sengun. Teams are going to switch against Alperen Sengun. Teams are going to put guards on Alperen Sengun. Salute to Stephon Castle and what he did. Now you have to win those matchups for us, or else we are in a different spot. You know, we're counting on you as a pillar, right? We're counting on you to be able to get a bucket, to force rotation, to force a double. Earlier in the season, when he was getting doubled, you had the mix, you had the blend. If it's going to be guard on you, go ahead, try. We're going to stay home, or we're going to show help off Amen. It's tough.
No, I think that's fair. I think to the KD Sengun two-man game, I want to bounce off of everything you said there because that was great stuff. One of the things that I wanted to make sure that I looked at was, okay, what exactly is KD and Sengun doing when they're in the two-man actions? And what does it look like when we get to the fourth quarter, when we get into some of the late offense looks in particular? And so it was noteworthy to me overall. They're running about 15 picks per 100 possessions when it's KD and Sengun. Obviously less than that when it's Sengun KD. But with KD and Sengun in action in pick and roll, 0.97 points per possession, that is fine. You get to the fourth quarter, that drops to 0.87 points per possession. They're seeing switches on 20% of those. They are seeing two on the ball at a pretty high rate on those, but I think that is more, to your point, that's more KD. Let's get the ball out of his hands. Now let's see what Sengun does. Or you get into some of two on the ball, pre-rotate, now it turns into an isolation possession for Alperen Sengun. And this is where, and one of the things that I've kind of harped on as someone that has enjoyed the Sengun season overall this year, you know how high I've been on him, the finishing does just kind of have to hit a certain level with him. And to this point of the season, like, it has been sub-elite when you're talking about what he's doing inside of like 6 feet or so, especially when you're looking at just the half-court possessions in particular. And when you get late in games to the point, like, hey, did you make the shot? Like, it is funny to see some of the post-ups against Victor Wembanyama where he's just the herky-jerky post-up. I'm getting the weird, lean, hooking shot over him to get to go. Those are still tough looks. And if those don't fall, that is not only a miss, that is a miss at the rim. And with Houston being as good as they are on the offensive glass, they do still try to generally clear a little bit more space when it's the Sengun attacks in particular. So you're missing at the rim. You're not getting the offensive rebound chances, which further bleeds into the Rockets haven't been the best transition defense in the league this year. I think 12th in frequency allowed, but in terms of the points per possession number, it is not where they want it to be. And so it is more on Alperen Sengun, as simplistic as the analysis could be. You kind of got to make more shots, big dog. Like, the talent is there, but if you don't, that puts a lot more pressure on Kevin Durant, who has his own, like, obviously one of the best scorers we've ever seen, but something that I've talked to you about before. Hey, teams get grabby with him off the ball, and Houston already plays slow, and so now you're trying to run something for Kevin Durant. It takes a while for you to get across half court. It takes a while for KD to even get off the screens, and by the time he catches the ball, he's getting pushed out, and now he's facing the set defense. Like, some of that is just inherent KD limitation, but it's also like, that's not a fair spot for him to be put in all the time. And so I'm just kind of intrigued to see how they build the boat from there.
No, I think that's fair. I think that's very fair. And I think it's it comes down to what teams are willing to do against those two and how can they operate and punish teams. Now, would we like to talk about Amen Thompson?
Yes. One of the most fascinating players in the league.
I know you have thoughts about Amen Thompson. I think it gets really interesting, especially when we look at that San Antonio game. A lot of people were like, hey, This is an indictment on Ime Udoka and coaching, and Amen Thompson's going to be a massive playoff problem. I think that undersells it a little bit. I think Amen Thompson is at his best when he is making quick decisions, when he's decisive, when he's aggressive. Teams are literally just saying, this is how we're going to guard you. And so we're going to give you a bunch of space that can, in theory, open up an attack, that can, in theory, open him up as a screener. We know Houston's going to use him as an off-ball screener or an on-ball screener to get him back to the dunker spot, make a guard, make a decision. I think the tricky part with San Antonio is they have Victor Wembanyama, and he allows you to make absurd rotations. But if you look at what like Amen does, like it's like once they put Wemby on Amen Thompson, it changed the game to a degree. And so if he's guarding Amen Thompson, okay, I'm playing off of you. These passes aren't easy. And now if you get to the corner or you get to the dunker spot, I'm Victor Wembanyama. I like being on the block. This is fantastic for our defense. And that's where it's like, okay, yeah, I understand the issue and hey, they're playing off of him like he's insert non-shooter here. But that's a very specific issue that team can present to the Rockets. I don't know if you can duplicate that, where Wemby's able to kind of double and muck everything up, and now you have the combination of the wing. I think that's where it gets tricky, because we can put a wing on Sengun, we put Wemby on Amen. What are you running? How are you getting this done? And so I don't know if that's something everyone can duplicate, because Amen's really good at cutting and floating around and getting downhill in different ways. It's just that level of, hey, we can do this against Sengun. We put a guard on him. Wemby's in his ideal spot. Your flashes and cuts don't hit the same, and he can still help. That was a different issue, I think, than just a pure, we can't execute in the half court. Not everyone has that guy on defense to be able to muck things up in that way, right? That was a very specific attack on the Houston Rockets, because now you can't necessarily automatically say, well, Amen Thompson, go be a screener, right? Cool. He's rolling into Victor Wembanyama, and he tried to take his head off. But how many times do you want to do that, right, guys? So that's where it's like, okay, I understand the concern, but you gotta know that that's a different deal. That's more of the Spurs Rockets mini battle than everyone can do that.
Yeah, that's fair. Hence the tweet, because Amen caught that thing back to try to get Wemby. And it's like, okay, this is a level of aggression. Like, that's what also kind of made me laugh. I have a very brief rant. So, like, on one hand, because like there were some shots passed up by Amen, he took 23 in the game. It wasn't like I am scared now, I am just not going to be involved in the offense whatsoever. Which brings me to, so towards the end of the third quarter, Steve,
oh my,
you had a possession where KD walks across half court. Dylan Harper immediately comes with a double team. It's like, okay, they're getting the ball out of his hands. So the ball finds Amen Thompson, who's being defended by Victor Wembanyama. And Amen is by himself and ends up dribbling and plays De'Aaron Fox in the corner with Jabari Smith. He's like, nah, I don't really care. And so Amen's like, all right, cool, what are we getting into? Eventually flows into a handoff with Kevin Durant. You briefly get two on the ball. Amen Thompson scores on this possession. It is worth noting that, you know, the dunk happens like 15 seconds left on the clock. So that was going to be the last offensive possession for Houston. They didn't have enough time to bleed it all the way down. But like, they play slow anyway. They want to bleed clock on top of that because of where the quarter was time-wise. And they ended up scoring. And the amount of clips and screenshots and tweets that I saw about that possession where like that is the example of Amen Thompson being a problem in the half court and Ime Udoka's coaching is a problem. And when you get to the playoffs, they're not going to be able to score with this dude. One of the things that bugs me the most, Steve, you know this, long-term dunkers know this if you're new here. One of my most annoying things in basketball discourse is when people have a valid point or valid concern and they use an awful example to make the point.
Oh, my.
It burns me up, because it's just like, yeah, it's like some of the scoring stuff with Amen that could be a problem. A center on Amen, because it wasn't just Wemby, it was Luke Cornett too. That can be a problem. That can hem up things. If you put a wing on Alperen Sengun on top of that, we're just switching all the KD stuff with Alperen Sengun, and then you have the wrong. Like, yeah, that's a problem. Using the end of quarter possession in which the guy goes into a handoff with Kevin Durant, who gets two on the ball and they get a dunk out of it, is not the example I would use to highlight offensive problems. But that is just me. I just wanted to get that off of my chest. Now, to Amen Thompson, a little bit. To Amen Thompson, who I am a fan of, I think you nailed it in terms of this being some of this being Wemby specific with how they want to keep him low on the floor and things like that. And I think putting that type of big on Amen Thompson in particular is a problem because we're testing out. Look, we don't care about your shooting. That's already big then. You mentioned the dunker spot rolling. Amen's very good at kind of mooching baskets around the dunker spot area. And through the team wide impact for Houston, this is the best offensive rebounding team in the league, Steve. It's a lot easier to get offensive rebounds if you're already in the dunker spot and you're an insane athlete. If Victor Wembanyama is there, you're probably not getting as many of those rebounds if he's not like challenging the shot and taking himself out of the area, of course. And so like it's a two-pronged issue on that front. But I think when we talk about Amen, it's unfortunate that that game was as loud as it was, particularly in that second half. Because I've been watching Rockets games this month. Been watching them this year, obviously, but like watching Rockets games this month. I tweeted out a couple weeks ago, through the first 10 games of January, Amen Thompson's averaging 21 points per game and he's converting 57% of his twos. And I'm like watching him in the half court in particular, and some of the mid-range shots that he was getting into. Again, you're not going to confuse him with Kevin Durant, of course, but it's like, he's operating a little slower in the middle of the floor now. He seems to be getting on balance more often. He's squaring up more consistently. Like he is getting into more comfortable shots for himself. Is this enough to bend what defenses want to do to him? Like, no, not yet. There's just a volume and you just got to keep doing it before the scouting report updates. It's like, okay, this is encouraging because the cutting's going to be there. The dunker spot stuff is going to be there. The transition scoring is going to be there. If he's more comfortable taking these types of shots, you at least have a baked in counter once you get into the playoffs. And again, once you get to the postseason, you've said this all the time, Steve, the logic makes sense to help off of a non-shooter. If the ball goes in, the ball goes in. Like those are just points on the board, and you may lose if he makes enough of those shots. So it's encouraging to see that. And so to have this like 6-game stretch where it's gone the other way, and to have this Rocket Spurs game in particular, where the second half got very muddy for him, it was unfortunate. I think the quieter part of the Amen situation for me is like, you got to keep an eye on what the half court scoring is for him. Like some of the self-created looks for him on drives. Because like that's the portion for me that I want to see more consistency with when it comes to him, like the layups in particular. Because I feel like he's still trying to figure out, am I going off one? Am I going off two? He has like a bunch of Euro steps and different decels in his bag, but like when am I deploying those? When I do seek contact, like am I leaning into the body? Am I ripping through the arm? Am I utilizing pump fakes and getting into that? Like he's still trying to figure out that portion. I think if you are someone that teams are not afraid of from the perimeter, you can offset that with strong finishing and or foul drawing. And the fact that he doesn't have either of those to a consistent degree in the half court right now, that might be a bigger issue than the jumper itself. Because I think there are natural counters to I'm on the perimeter, I can just flow in the handoffs with someone, to the KD example.
I think I would say, honestly, it's just about his patience and how he understands the space when teams are trying to work an under against him or they're trying to give him a gap. And I think you feel the weight and the loudness of that with Amen Thompson to where, okay, the man's backed off at the elbow. I'm trying to run the set. Okay, how much does the set matter? Can I turn the corner and now it turns to a finish? That's really tough to guard when I do that, when I pass and cut. But how often is he going to get into that quick? And how often he's going to bounce out, wait, now I've held the ball for 5 to 6 seconds. And even though I'm getting to a spot where I can kind of operate in mid-range, get a shot off, is that a positive for us? It now puts me in make or miss territory, where as opposed to I can just be a timely shot maker. And so I think if you're watching, you can see, okay, he's had the ball for 8 seconds dribbling. No one's guarding him. And now he gets into a pull-up. And it doesn't feel as good as if he just went into it, And so that kind of ties into where can we make some quicker decisions in these moments to put yourself in a stronger position?
No, I think that's fair. And like, this is also just part of the natural growth of Amen having the ball in his hands a lot more than he did last year. Like he's had to take on more on-ball duties in general because Fred VanVleet is not there. And so some of this is he just has to get used to this. He just has to get better at this. Like this is not the first time in his basketball life that he's been tasked with initiation, but doing so on an NBA scale while also having to placate both Alfred Sengun and now Kevin Durant, who's on your team. It's like, yeah, man, like sometimes I just want to pass because I have these two dudes. You know what I mean? And this is also baked into Houston wants to play a little bit more deliberate on top of that. So some of this is just we are getting to our offense. I am dribbling because no one is pressuring my handle, and no one is pressuring my handle because teams don't fear my jumper. And so like all of this is kind of going through his brain, I would imagine. And so no, it hasn't been as clean as you would want it to. And I think it is fair to have concerns about what level are we going to reach in year 2 of the postseason for Amen Thompson. Because if you remember the Warriors series, it took him a couple games to kind of figure out, okay, what exactly are my windows? What are my shots? What are my drives? How aggressive do I need to be? And again, this is a Rockets team that didn't have KD yet. But he eventually started to find that comfort. Wasn't always the most consistent production, but at the very least, he started to find that comfort. I think he's ultimately going to get there. Like he's made strides compared to last season. But it's an interesting spot for him and the team to be in overall.
All right. So we talked a lot about the offense, and I'm sure you had other things you wanted to talk about. So what else do you got? What do you want to dive into on the Rockets, Nekias?
Oh, man. Okay, we have to get to this defense. The one thing I would say, and I'll pose a quick question to you, because you mentioned Reed Sheppard a little bit earlier. How important is he to solving some of the half-court stuff for Houston offensively this year? Is it fair to put that level of burden on him to kind of be that X factor for them?
I wouldn't say so, because as much of a talent that he is, him playing well helps Houston. Does him playing well automatically make the defense do something different? He's not immune to unders, right? He's not immune to switches. He's not immune to two. He's not an automatic 2 on the ball. So yes, his pull-up game helps. His spacing helps. His shooting helps. Turning the corner, making plays helps. I wouldn't say that's the key to unlock Houston's offense, because if I'm an opposing coach, I know where the weak points are to a degree. And yeah, Reed Sheppard has the highest likelihood of making me pay in a fourth quarter. But that doesn't necessarily mean, hey, I'm going to put you in action on the other end, number one. And number two, I'm going to guard y'all how we've been guarding y'all. You got to make enough of these shots to make me think about doing this. And so I think he has the highest upside. I think he has the highest ceiling to help them. I don't know if it's an automatic to change what they do or how teams treat them.
Okay. I think that's fair. Like I think that's fair. Like I think for me, I do think he is the X factor in this regard because of the shooting. Like the ability itself is helpful. The gravity itself, I think, is helpful. Even if he's not a consistent 2 on the ball guy, on the ball, like he is someone that you have to close out to at the very least. And I think that greases the wheels. I've talked a little bit about earlier this year. Like I want to see more of Reed as a screener. He needs to get better at screening, and I think he has as the season has gone on, to be fair to him. But like I do want to see more of that usage to help unlock some of the star guys when he's out on the floor with them. Defensively, you would think at the very least Houston has the infrastructure to cover for everything that teams want to poke at with him, whether it's the size, it's the quickness. He does have quick hands. He is, I think, stronger than he looks, but at the same time, he is just going to be the smaller guy on the floor. So that part hurts. It is interesting, like looking at some of the off data for PvP stats. Houston basically a +7 with him on. It's a +6 with him off. They're a good team. So it doesn't surprise me that they're winning the minutes when he's not on the floor. But they are better with him. And the defense has been slightly better with him on the floor versus off. Like I think some of that is just the sample size. Some of that is who they are surrounding him with when he's on the floor. It makes sense to go more defensively slanted around him to cover for him. So that makes sense. But I've enjoyed watching him develop, his confidence continue to grow, his development in terms of like the 2-man game with Sengun and with KD, which I'll quickly note, Steve. Only 0.91 points per possession on Reed KD pick and rolls overall this year. In the month of January, nearly 1.3 points per possession on those. They are really starting to catch a rhythm. KD, I've really talked about the screening. The KD screens have kind of surprised me this year. Like he's hitting people on some of those, and you really feel those with the Reed pick and rolls with him in particular. But like KD hits someone, and if it's a drop, Reed doesn't mind getting all the way downhill or flowing into pull-ups. If you switch, Reed can take a bigger guy off the bounce, or hey, that's Kevin Durant. I'm just giving you the ball and getting out of the way. Do you want to send help? Because if you do, that might be Reed taking a shot or attacking the closeout, and then you're off to the races on that front. And so, like, that feels like something baked in that's growing more chemistry and getting a little bit more dangerous. So if we're talking about late game stuff, I think Reed could be a part of that. And, like, kind of bouncing off of the Amen situation, I do wonder as we get closer to the postseason or when we get into the postseason, do we start to see more, like, offense, defense subs with Reed and Amen? Like, does Ime ever tap that button? Because it feels like if he's going to close with Reed, like both of them are just going to be on the floor. But in theory, you still have Tari Eason. Like, you have a bunch of perimeter defenders to where if you want to go, okay, it's a defensive possession, Reed, get out of here, I'm in, you're in. It's an offensive possession, Reed, get in here, I'm in, they put their centers on you. Let's just chill with that. That optionality exists at the very least. I am curious to see if Ime gets into that bag.
Understood. Did you have a final Houston Rockets thought? That's it?
Oh boy, that's it for that. The defense is so incredibly good and so incredibly fun, and I've been intrigued by. It's a continuation of them just being a physical group, a switchable group. They've ramped up their pressure this year. Like, you've talked about the recent matchup against the Detroit Pistons, against the OKC Thunder. Like, they are blitzing ball screens more often than they did last year, which I find interesting. And this is also tied into, we are going to cross match. We're going to have Sengun staying low on the floor. We're going to put him on a non-shooter, and we can just kind of muck things up elsewhere. And so, like, I still have a high level of belief in this defense, Steve. This is what is going to bring them to the dance. That'd be, I guess, just my general thought there. Like, this is why they are as good as they are. Like, the defense is absurd. They have so many guys that they can throw at you.
The defense is their bread and butter, and it's going to be very strong in the playoffs. And so that defense being so strong gives you the wiggle room to kind of navigate some of these offensive issues that they've tried to figure out throughout the season.